The recent national controversies over Confederate memorials resulted in local tensions focused primarily on the Robert E. Lee statue in Lee Park, which is a City of Dallas property. Mayor Mike Rawlins appointed a task force which issued recommendations, and you have a printout of the recommendations at your spot. And I'm aware of two of the items that have already been adopted. One was the removal of the statue from Lee Park, and the other was renaming or returning to the original name of the park as Oaklawn Park. Thank you all for joining us in this discussion. I want to give you a couple of bios, if I have them. Mr. Taft Thompson is the precinct chair of the Republican precinct number 3055. He's a member of the Dallas County GOP Minority Engagement Committee and serves as a Dallas County Republican election judge. He has served under the Republican Leadership Initiative as a participant under the leadership of Texas Governor Greg Abbott. He was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, and has been a resident of Dallas for 4 years. Currently, he serves as Director of External Affairs for the Solomon Group. He believes in the principles of individual liberties, economic prosperity, and personal responsibility. Buddy Apple, too. Okay. Beginning on, let's see. This gentleman here is the Reverend Maxie Johnson. He is a pastor of God's Praise and Worship Center in Louisville, Texas. He has served as the president of the South Oak Cliff Parents Association and was a leader in the South Oak Cliff community's activism concerning the issues associated with gas inspections and safety and drawing media attention to them. Ms. Maggie.
What we're going to do is we're going to ask the panelists to speak each for 5 minutes, and you're going to be timed. We're all going to be timed. We're going to see little cards around that are going to keep us on track, and then we're going to get into a Q&A session. And so you all have cards there on your tables. If you all could, as we go along, if there's questions that you want to ask, then one of the volunteers here will be available to pick up the cards and give them to me so that we can make sure that all of your questions get answered. So I would like to start with Buddy. Buddy, if you don't mind, Mr. Thompson, I'd like to go to you next. That's okay. Tell us, you weren't on the task force, but tell us your perspective, and did you follow it closely? What were your thoughts as everything was being discussed?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here. To answer your question, ma'am, I was unaware of the task force as far as the reading dates, as far as what they were proposing. Just as Mr.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
I'm sorry.
It's real important for everybody to speak up, because even though it's a small room, we lose voices because of the audio.
Could you hear me earlier? Or?
That's better.
Again, I was unaware of when the task force meetings were occurring. With that being said, there were a number of us, and particularly, I'm a member of the Dallas GOP. We were unaware of when these task force meetings were being held. And then we would get information at the very last minute saying, hey, there's a city council hearing. I believe it was in the beginning of September, right after Labor Day. They said that there was going to be a hearing. And so we were also very disgruntled because we figured that was planned, because that was right after Labor Day, people coming from out of town or coming back in town, and you don't have time to prepare. So that's one of the issues that I had a concern with. Your second question regarding...
What are your thoughts about, the task force as you learned about the task force? Where did you weigh in? Where did you weigh in on the issue? And how, did the GOP see it from your point of view?
Okay. And I'll answer that in two ways. Back in August, I was interviewed by Sean Rabb on Fox News, and I stated my position in that I do not believe that the statue should be taken down. And there was a myriad of reasons. One of the reasons I explained, ladies and gentlemen, was that the statues represent an historical legacy in our country. The Civil War existed. There were lives lost. There were more lives lost in the Civil War than any other war, or loss of American lives. But I had made the comment that if my ancestors were alive who were slaves, and I would have asked them, would you like for those statues to be taken down? I believe they would tell me no, because they would say, if you take them down, who would remember us? Who would talk about us? And so there is a legacy that we want to erase, and that's the legacy of slavery. You cannot omit it. You cannot do away with it. The biggest problem with revisionist history is that you cause more problems when you try to change things, instead of keeping things the way in which they are. So again, with that being said, you face the truth. For some people, it's an ugly historical reality when it comes to racial tensions. However, I will say, and I learned it from this perspective, I'm from the South. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. Grew up a Democrat. And when I was in high school, a lot of the white kids, they used to have the Confederate flags. And I used to be irate about it. But one of my friends told me, he goes, Taft, he goes, we're not about racism or anything. He said that this represents our history. This is who we are, you know, and it took me the longest time to be able to grasp that as a 16, 17-year-old kid. But I understand now. I'm saying that to say that those Southerners who have Confederate ancestry, they have a history too. They are part of this country also. And they are just as, they have the right to express their displeasure and their anger when it comes to a part of their history and the country's historical legacy being torn down. It's a very practical matter.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna give you more time to talk about it, and I wanna take what you just said, and if, Maggie, if I can ask you this, and I think, Mr. Thompson, you wanted to expand on one of the points that you made.
Oh, Ms. Morrison, and this goes back to my original point about the task force. The vote was 13-1, right?
The city council.
Your city council was 13-1. The council member, and I believe it was a lady who voted against it. I believe her reasoning was that she voted against it because there was not enough, or there wasn't adequate information and or time that was put out to the public in regards to this issue. So that one vote who was against it, I'm with her. And I understand her reasoning for making that comment. And this is what I try to express to you all, is the fact that there was not adequate time, there was not a plethora of information to let the public know that these task force hearings were going on, and also to participate. So just as someone said, just as you said, there wasn't a great turnout. And so with that being said, that's what I wanted to comment about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say that, you know, the city of New Orleans, that was one of the first cities to take down major Confederate monuments, they spent about a year on this issue. The city of Dallas, from the time the mayor appointed the task force to the time the statue came down, it was very fast. And he has stated that it was because he was very concerned about the potential for violence. He had a real fear for that happening in Dallas, and that's why there was such a rush, but it certainly was very fast.
All right, I would like to get to some questions now. I'm not sure who to direct this to, so I'm gonna let you all decide who wants to take this. In this era of fake news, we have become more sensitized to the need for truth and facts to make sound decisions, both personally and in the civic arena. How do you deal with the issue of fake history?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to start off by saying that we have gotten to this point regarding the sensitivity and the outrage over Confederate statues over the Charlottesville incident. Allow me to start off by saying that that morning or that afternoon, President Trump came out and he renounced what happened. Later on that evening, there was a Democratic congressman, and I'm not trying to get into partisan politics, but there was a Democratic congressman who said, I don't accept his apology. And they said, well, why not? He said, because he didn't mention the word white supremacist. And so as a result of him not saying the word white supremacist, we've gotten into the debate and we got to the anger. We got to the point to where we are now. And so with all this being said about Lee and, for example, most recently, there are a number of schools that are thinking about changing their names because they have a Confederate influence. A lot of people didn't even know. A lot of people have graduated from these schools from years ago, never knew that there was a so-called Confederate influence with the names of their schools. And so before I end, I also want to say that I'd like for you to think about this. Do we destroy Mount Rushmore? Do we destroy our currency system? Because we have George Washington on our $1 bill. We have Thomas Jefferson on the $2 bill. Do we destroy our currency because they were former slave owners? Secondly, do we also tear down Mount Rushmore because they were slave owners? So this is the point to where it's pretty much gotten out of hand, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I said we face the history as it is. And according to the sheet right here, which I'm glad that they put the information on, it says that 123 are opposed to removal. And this is the general public. So with that being stated here, those are in tying into fake news. The media is trying to promote division, and we're buying into it. And I just want us to just keep in mind, just as I stated earlier, President Trump that day said, hey, I'm against so-called groups doing this. And a congressman came out and said, well, it wasn't good enough because he didn't say white supremacists. And we're at the point to where we are now. So again, this is just kind of a divide and conquer type of situation that we're involved in. So,
But let me, Johnson, what do you think?
Yeah.
Is the answer?
I'm trying to filter through so I can say it the nicest way. I was listening to Mr. Thompson. Just because you don't know something does not make it right. When he said that a lot of people didn't know about Robert E. Lee, and so the names would not be moved if they didn't know, it shouldn't make that big a deal. That's kind of how I got it. And I feel that even if I didn't know my history, when I learned my history, I would want to support what I've learned. In other words, if I didn't know about Robert E. Lee, but once I come into the knowledge of what he stood for, I would not want my school named after someone that did those terrible things. So just because I don't know about something is not an excuse. The one scripture says, after you come into the knowledge of knowing, there remains no more excuse. So I cannot continue to say just because I don't know is permissible. I totally disagree with that. When I'm looking, just read this. When it comes to Mr. Lee, when 3 slaves escaped, Lee had them tied to a post, whipped, 50 lashes for men, 20 for women, and then had their backs washed with stinking brine. That's like getting beaten and then putting some alcohol on an open sore. This is what he did to slaves. But yet we have a monument of celebrating him. That's basically the message that we have been sending. We name a school after him. And I do understand that a lot of the schools are trying to rename the schools, and I agree with that because I want our names on the schools to have a positive influence instead of when you're looking at Mr. Lee, you're looking at what he stood for. So I think there's some positive history and some positive people that did tremendous work in America that we can name our school after. But just to say, just because we don't know, that's not positive to me.
Yes. Talk about how we act as a people. I keep going back to you, Mr. Johnson, Reverend Johnson, because you talked about these discussions that you've had with young people. Where would that place be? What would that place look like where people from all walks of life and all colors and all ages would come together to have discussions like this.
I think it takes a certain level of maturity first and openness to come and have discussions like this. And the end goal would be to leave with the understanding, but the understanding of love, understanding that we are different and that history did happen. What we ask for a lot of times in our community is equity. I think once we get equity, I think a lot of things will change. As Mr. Thompson said, you cannot erase history. It has happened. You know, you look at it, you learn from it, and you grow from it. And so I think what we need to do to go forward is understand each other's differences, accept each other's differences, embrace each other, and love each other, because the truth of the matter is we are all of God's children. No matter what color you are, where you come from.
I know we all know that, but how do you do that? How do you,
You have to work. You have to work. You have to communicate. You have to talk.
What is the vision? Buddy, let me ask you that. What's the vision?
I just said this to Ms. Maggie. I believe that we need to educate our children more. I think a lot of times hate is developed when you're unlearned. You don't know what's going on. So you're listening to what this person said, that person said, and you're going off of that. But if you educate our children, I feel like our children, especially in every level of education, elementary, middle school, high school, go on field trips, teach them, let them know what's going on, show them the history so they can make a wise decision and embrace our history instead of hating what has happened with just hate, with just emotion, without knowledge.
I'm going to give you an example. Robert Johnson.
Maggie for mayor.
My son David Johnson led the protest at South Oak Cliff High School. He served on the Youth Commission of Dallas. He was a member of the Mayor's Rising Star Council. David Johnson, my daughter's name Taylor Johnson. She serves currently on the Youth Commission of Dallas, dealing with the educational piece. When I speak with them in my household and speak with their friends, they're embracing education. They want to know because they have a lot of questions. Along with those questions, they have solutions, even when they don't really know everything. And they're feeling like if we can just love each other and not hide what we've endured as a community, as an African American community, and show us the right way. That's one of the main things that our kids are asking for when you sit and talk with them. They want to be shown the right way. They just don't want to have hate in their heart and not know what's going on. So I agree with Ms. Maggie. Let's educate them. I think if we educate them and wrap our arms around them, no matter what color their skin is, and show them that even though hate is in the world and hate will forever exist in the world, there is a lot of people that will love you, that will show you the right way, and that will embrace you no matter what color your skin, no matter where you come from, no matter if you came up in a single home or not. You can make it. You can embrace the history, and you can allow the history to make you better and make you a better person going forward. So that's what I would suggest.
Yes.
I'd like to go back earlier. It was an earlier question where what can be done as far as outreach and educational opportunities to talk about these issues. And I wanted to say, first of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters. And with that being said, I believe that this platform that you all have originated, I would encourage establishing partnerships as far as reaching out to, the NAACP, Urban League. You have a number of mega churches. There are a number of cultural artists. So I would recommend establishing partnerships. And such as you're having this wonderful discussion tonight, you can also use this platform to do it in other parts of the city and everything. So that's one thing that I would say. The second thing is, based on what Ms. Morrison said about Robert E. Lee, and this is my standpoint also, I don't think it's so much about glorification. I'm looking at it from a standpoint of reality. He was not a perfect man. as a human being, and as any person, I mean, as any human being, you have good, you have bad. History represents the good and the bad of everything. So when I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, Kentucky was a border state. And so when you go to Louisville, there are a number of Confederate statues. With that being said, my parents told me, you know, Taft, this represents this. This is what happened during, you know, this time. What they wanted to do, it was educational. It wasn't anything about for or against like it is now. It was just about, hey Taft, this is what this statue is representing, and this is the information that precluded it or preceded it. And so with that being said, I think that whatever is out there as far as statues still being, you know, present, I believe that we should confront what the reality is. And I know that we're in the current debate of, you know, taking them down and being offensive and things of that nature. I just take the standpoint that it's an historical perspective. As I stated earlier, if my ancestors were alive, I believe that they would say, you know, keep the statues up, because if you take them down, you forget about us. You forget about our story. And so I'm not also one saying that I'm for or against it. I'm just looking at the reality of what it is. Finally, coming from a business standpoint, and I don't know these groups, but I do respect the fact that, and these statues have been around for hundreds of years, 80 years or so. There were certain groups that invested money in those statues. You know, there was money invested in those statues to have them in certain places. What I'm saying is, I don't know who these groups are, but I understand the value of money being used to erect something that you feel strongly about. And with that being said, I respect that. I respect the fact that, you know, groups were able to come together, organize, put together, you know, monies or resources to erect what they feel was honorable, if you want to take it from that standpoint. But with that being said, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to have me on the panel, and I appreciate everybody's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, panel, for all your perspectives. Let's give them a hand.